I'm going to tell you why Kansas might compare similarly and maybe favorably to a team that made the Elite Eight from this past season, and now they could be a version of them that's maybe souped up, maybe a little chance for a little bit more this season.
You are Locked On Jayhawks, your daily podcast on the Kansas Jayhawks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, everybody? Derek Johnson here at D Johnson Radio on Twitter, and you can find Locked On Jayhawks anywhere you get your podcasts, including on our YouTube page where you can like and subscribe to the show. Thank you to the everydayers catching each and every episode of the show and tuning in wherever you listen, and thanks for making Locked On Jayhawks your first listen every day. On today's episode of LOJ, we're going to be talking if this Kansas team can be a souped-up version of Michigan State from last year, a team that made the Elite Eight, a team that Kansas oddly enough defeated in the non-conference portion of the season. We're also going to grade the Kansas basketball offseason and get some of the latest news, including with the Kansas TBT team. Today's episode of the show is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. All right, so I kind of think there are some similarities you can make between the roster that has been built by Bill Self for this year's KU basketball team and the Michigan State team from this past season. I think, to me, the whole idea of this starts with, the fact that, I don't know if you include Michigan State in the Blue Bloods. To me, they'd probably be in that, second tier, whatever that would be. Like, the tier one is your Kansas and Kentuckys and Dukes and North Carolinas and stuff like that. Your tier twos would probably have Michigan State, but whatever. Point being, it's a dominant college basketball program, so to speak. And that's the case with Michigan State. That's the case with Kansas, right? And the case for Michigan State coming into last season was that they were being, slept on a little bit. And a certain bit of that was because of, not a ton of success the previous couple seasons for Tom Izzo. Like, coming into last season, they lost in the second round of the tournament. The year before that, they made the Sweet 16, but they were a 7 seed. And, the year before they were a 9 seed. So, kind of similar to Kansas, where it's okay, was Tom Izzo losing his fastball? Is Bill Self losing his fastball? And then we found out this year, no, that's not the case. Tom Izzo is just fine. They finished 7th on KenPom this year. They started the season 35th on KenPom, right? They were not a team that people were clamoring should be ranked in the top 15 and the top 25 in preseason rankings. You look at Kansas, I think they'll be ranked, although a guy like John Rothstein doesn't have them in this top 25. But I don't know that anybody's going to really, a majority of people, I don't think, or a big chunk of people are going to have them in the top 10 or the top even maybe 15. And so it feels like they're being slept on a little bit, similar to how Michigan State was last year. And obviously, again, Michigan State ended up finishing 7th in KenPom. They won 30 games. They made it to the Elite Eight, in which they lost to Auburn, who was the number 1 overall seed by 6 points. Very good season for Michigan State, right? They go 17-3 in conference play. Very good season for Michigan State, right? And if you said right now that Kansas would get a top 2 seed in the NCAA tournament and make it to the second weekend of the tournament for the first time in, 3-4 seasons, I guess by the time 2026 NCAA tournament happens, 4 years, I think Kansas fans would be pretty happy with the result there, right? I think the comparison continues too when you look at both of them having one kind of star guard, so to speak. With Michigan State, it took a little later into the season for them to, when Kansas played Michigan State earlier in the year, Jace Richardson, who ended up being a first-round pick as a one-and-done freshman, he was still coming off the bench, and he was still playing good minutes and contributing, but it wasn't to the level he was later in the season when it kind of went from, okay, he's a good scorer for us and a good player coming off the bench and one of our better players, to later in the season, it became, we're going to build the offense around him for what Michigan State did. The difference there is that with Kansas and Bill Self, it's probably going to be like that from the word go with Darryn Peterson. This isn't going to be, okay, we're going to feel it out, and then in January we'll build it around Peterson. No, it's been built around Peterson, but you have a star guard. And that's what I mean when I said earlier, I think Kansas could be a souped-up version of this. Because as good as Jace Richardson was, especially over the back half of the season as a true freshman, I think Peterson's going to be even better. And so if you're saying, okay, there's some similarities between these teams and you have the better version of the superstar, that's a good place to start, right? But you look at it, and that Michigan State team, why were they so good this past season? They finished 25th on offense. They finished 4th on defense. I think there's a chance Kansas could be in that range, right? I think Kansas is going to have one of the best defenses in the country when you look at the positional size, when you look at the athleticism that they have all over the court, when you look at some of the impact defenders that they might have. The offense, I think, is going to be better than it's been in recent years because you have more guys like Darryn Peterson that can kind of get you a bucket here or there. I don't know that because I do have some questions about the 3-point shooting, I do wonder, like, okay, could the offense be top 30 good, top 25 good? Yes. Are they probably going to be top 5 good? I don't know. That remains to be seen to me, unless like you have guys break out in a real way shooting. But again, Michigan State finishes a top 25 offense, and they did it on the backs of like 2-point offense, getting to the free throw line, and rebounding the basketball. Michigan State was not a good 3-point shooting team last season. They were a strong rebounding team. They were an athletic team who was really good in transition, and not a very good shooting team. And that could be the path for Kansas this year, right? Again, Kansas has a ton of positional size, length, wingspan, versatility. Kansas has a ton of good athletes. Kansas should be really good in transition this year, just like Michigan State was last year. You look at Michigan State's rebounding numbers from this past season: 28th in offensive rebound rate, 9th in defensive rebound rate. Maybe those end up a little higher than where Kansas is, but like Kansas could finish around, a couple of those marks. And then you also say that, okay, strong 2-point offensive teams. Well, Michigan State finished 107th in the country in 2-point offense. So like they were solid at it, but they weren't like elite at it. And part of that is teams get to pack the paint because they know you're not a good 3-point shooting team. There's a chance Kansas could be better than that. But here's the big one. Again, going back to the idea that Kansas could be a souped up version, a better version of it. Okay, maybe you're a little worse at the rebounding. Michigan State was 319th in the country in 3-point percentage, 31.1%. They were also 327th in the country in 3-point attempt rate. So I, again, have questions about what the 3-point shooting is going to be for this Kansas team, but I think it's better than that. I think it's better than 300. My questions are more so, are they going to finish 200th? Are they going to finish around nationally average? Are they going to shoot 33%, 33.5% from three? Is that going to be enough? But if we look at Michigan State, that would be, worlds better than what they ended up shooting from 3-point range, right? Going back to the idea that it could be a souped up version of that. And you look at the defensive side of the floor, what made Michigan State so good this past season? They got a little bit maybe fortunate because they have the second best 3-point defense in the country. So maybe a little bit of that is luck. Maybe a bit of that is scheme and what they wanted to do. But they were top 30 in the country in block rate defensively, right? And okay, what does Kansas have the ability to do with Floyd Badunga and Paul Mbia? Probably block a lot of shots this upcoming season, right? They were, if you look at Big Ten only play for Michigan State, they were 5th in 2-point defense. So like they had a solid 2-point defense, but I think Kansas can be even better than that. The big key was kind of the rebounding. They were first in the country, or first in Big Ten only play in both offensive and defensive rebound rate. So if we say that, okay, Kansas should be a good rebounding team this year, when you look at Flory and Mbia and Tre White and just having guards who are athletic and are going to get their nose dirty and get those rebounds, but maybe they're not as good of a rebounding team, but they can be a better 3-point shooting team. They have the better superstar in Darryn Peterson. And, maybe they can be an even better 2-point defense than Michigan State was. And then you also look and say, okay, Michigan State was only 264th in the country in turnover rate defense. Like that's a number that I think Kansas will be better at this year, right? That's a number that both by having those guards with long arms and having positional versatility can create havoc. But also I think with having more of like Flory Badunga and stuff at the center, I think Kansas was stuck in having to play. I know they still did a lot of their hard hedging and icing ball screens and stuff with Hunter, but they did at times really have to play kind of a drop defense with Hunter. I think you have more opportunity with what you can do schematically on the defensive end. And if you're playing a drop, it's going to be really hard to force a lot of turnovers. Like that it's more of like a thinking football, like kind of a sitting back type of zone. Like we're going to make them beat us. Whereas like if you're playing man to man, sure, you might get burned every now and then, but you might cause more interceptions. You might cause more sacks. And that's how it is kind of in basketball, where it's like, if you're playing a drop, like you might get good shot blocks in the inside. You might make certain things harder. You might, funnel them into taking more mid-range shots, but you might create less turnovers too. And I think that'll be a little bit of a difference. So I say all this to say, like, I think that Michigan State team probably had more like depth of bigs. And again, the rebounding, while I still think will be good this year for KU, maybe it won't be quite as elite as Michigan State, but I do think there are a lot of similarities between how this KU roster has been built and what Michigan State just did this past season. That gives me a lot of hope that KU can and should outperform where some people are prognosticating they are in the preseason. Again, the Michigan State team, 2 seed, they made an Elite Eight. that would be KU's best run since 2022 when they won the national championship. And if we're saying they're a souped up version, if we're saying they're a better version of that Michigan State team, then why can't you make it even further? And who knows, for all we know, if Michigan State would have got a different bracket, if they didn't face the number one overall seed, like, I guess it's hard to say because it was all 4-1 seeds, right? But for all we know, if they were playing Houston in the Elite Eight, could they have beaten Houston? I don't know. It's entirely possible. So definitely a compliment if you can be a souped up version of this past year's Michigan State team. And I think there's a chance that that could be the case for this Kansas basketball team. How did that happen? Well, the offseason was a big part of it. Let's grade what happened or has happened so far. Are we done? I don't know. So far in the offseason. We'll get to that next. This is Locked On Jayhawks. Thanks for joining us here on this episode of Locked On Jayhawks. We are brought to you by Monarch. Ever wish managing your money felt easier? With Monarch Money, it can. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is more than a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you're also building wealth. Sometimes spending can pick up, especially if we're talking in the middle of summer, right? You might have that summer vacation plan. You might be out on your summer vacation and you're like, you know what? I wasn't planning on going, renting the jet skis, but the family looks like they're just going to have so much fun on it. So we'll expense that purchase too. Well, with Monarch, when you get that feeling of like, I feel like I'm getting a little out of control here, take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONCollege for half off your first year with Monarch Money. Thanks for joining us on this episode of Locked On Jayhawks. You can find our show anywhere you get your podcast, including on our YouTube page where you can like and subscribe to the show. And don't forget, you can check out Locked On College Football or Locked On College Basketball for your second listen every day. Okay, grading the KU basketball offseason, which I guess the first part of this is like, it felt like we were done after they added Paul Mbia and Cole Rosario, and then Noah Shelby left, and now they're back to 2 open spots, and it's like they could be done. They still have 12 scholarship players. But at the same point in time, it's like, well, there have been a few names that have been kicked around. Like maybe they could add one more guy, or maybe they had one more guy who's more of your developmental, like long-term piece that isn't going to cost a lot of money. It's entirely possible. So there could be more offseason left to be had. But as of right now, I wanted to grade this offseason for KU. Now, I should say I'm not grading the freshman additions, which I know technically Cole Rosario becomes an offseason addition with the timeline of when he joined, but I don't know. I view freshmen into that a little bit differently, especially because, some guys commit way earlier than others. So I just wanted to view this as like your transfer and international additions, so to speak. And I will say, I find it kind of funny that as much as we've talked over the offseason here, as much as we've gone over players and deep dives and rumored interest and names that have popped up with Kansas, or that, Kansas has popped up with names, and that we have spent so much time talking about all these guys, and with how many players transferred out of Kansas and how many open scholarship spots they had and how much filling of the roster they had to do. Just off the top of my head, when I was like, okay, how many players did KU add? Like, how many new guys are there on KU? And I was like, there's got to be what? Like, for obviously, portal and international editions, there got to be what, like 6 or something? I was thinking back and I was like, what? There were only 3 portal editions? As much as we've talked about the portal all offseason, 3 portal additions is all that happened this offseason. It feels like there should have been way more by then. Obviously, the 4th, if you're counting international, with Paul Mbia. So let's go player by player. So I think the first one to commit was Jayden Dawson. And that was kind of it. It just popped up out of nowhere and was seen as a really good addition. I'm going to give this one a B. I thought about giving this one a B+. I'll get into why in a second. To me, like, I would give like C's would be passing grades, right? I know C doesn't sound illustrious, but C I would give a passing grade. D would be like, I don't know about this. F would be like, that was a horrible addition. Why did you do that? A would be like, I think you can come in and be like an all-conference player right away, right? So I don't know that I expect Dawson to be an all-conference player right away. That's why I'm giving it a B as opposed to, an A or an A- or something like that. I did think about making it a B+, though, because if you're talking about adding fit, and that's something we talked about coming in the offseason, can Bill Self go for fit over talent? And there's not a better example of that than Jayden Dawson, somebody who can play off ball or can play on ball, can shoot the 3 ball, can play defense, is seen by his, if you talk to Loyola Chicago fans and stuff, he was kind of a dog and somebody that they really respected and appreciated. All of this makes me think closer to B+. The thing is, and I don't know, maybe this shouldn't matter. Like maybe I shouldn't factor in my guesses of what's going to happen, but like it does kind of have a feeling right now, which also we're so far away from the start of the season that so much can change. But right now it almost feels like Elmarko Jackson and Melvin Council might be a little bit further ahead on the depth chart than Jayden Dawson. And again, it might be minute. It might be, Elmarko's playing 26 minutes per game and Jayden Dawson's playing 24. You know, it might be super small. But that's like in the back of my head of like, okay, well then if I give him a B+ and you're saying that Melvin Council theoretically is ahead of him, who I'm about to get to here, then don't I have to give Melvin Council the same grade or better than where he is, right? And that's where I kind of get difficult here. But Dawson's a B. Honestly, for my money, Dawson is my favorite addition. The KU had via the portal or internationally, right? Obviously not talking like incoming freshman, but I love the addition. I'm just curious, like, is Bill Self, especially on a team that needs more three-point shooting, is Bill Self going to use him as much as I think he should be used on this year's team? This is the guy where, okay, let's talk Melvin Council. And I guess this is actually out of order because I think Council was the third of the 3 transfers coming in to commit. But it just makes sense to segue from what we were just talking about. So this is a tough one to grade. I'm also going to give Council a B. And like, not to just, okay, the same way. Again, if I was grading this based on like what I wanted from a player, I think I would have Council somewhere. I don't know. Like, again, it's impossible not to factor in fit. Is Bill Self going to like you? Therefore, allowing you to play a big role on the team. And I think the questions I have for Council, which are mostly about like efficiency, lack of, consistently shooting the basketball well from 3-point range, the fact that he doesn't get to the free throw line a lot, even though he's a good athlete and can get downhill at a good level. Like those things would probably have me closer to a B- or a B on Council specifically. I do love the defense though. I think, and I'd probably have it closer to B. I think if I was grading this, like if I was grading it from the perspective of what does Bill Self think, I could see this being a B+ and Dawson being a B or a B-. And I think Council's going to play a big role. I think Council's going to play 30+ minutes per game. And so that's where I also run into things where it's like, okay, I also, going back to the scale, if A's are all conference players, I don't know that I'd project him to be that. But if he's going to be a 30+ minute per game guy in Kansas, who's a good passer, a good athlete, good transition player, can score a little bit here and there, occasionally has his hot games, and is arguably the best perimeter defender on the team, is that worth more than just a straight B? Maybe it is, right? But I'm going to give it a B because I do have questions about the shooting, specifically about the fit with Kansas and needing more shooting, even though I am happy that Bill Self went for somebody that like he's going to love and he's going to play. Like that is a good thing. So I have Dawson and Council both as Bs. Again, I might have Dawson more of a B+ and Council more as a B or B-. I think Bill Self might have those switched, so we're going to just average out in the middle and have them both as Bs. Tre White, we're going to give this one actually a B+. I love Tre White's fit as a wing 4, and especially when you look at how the rest of the roster ended up getting built out. It's Samis Calderon on the wing, and like that's it, right? And we don't know how ready Samis Calderon is going to be. And so if you didn't have Tre White, you're either starting 2 bigs or you're starting like a 4th ball handling guard, right? Tre White is a fulcrum. He is a key piece in what this roster is and has become for Kansas. So part of it is the scarcity in position, but I also I really like his game. And like the one thing that keeps holding me back with, I guess maybe not making this an A or A- is that Tre White has not been on, like he was on a solid Illinois team last year. They got a 6 seed, made the second round of the NCAA tournament. His first 2 years though, wasn't really on winning teams. At least I think USC was like below 500 his first year. Obviously Louisville was a disaster with Kenny Payne, but that's probably more in Payne than it is with Tre White. I think Tre White is a good basketball player. And the reason I really love this, as you build around Darryn Peterson and Flory Badunga and all these guys, you need players who can do lots of different things, right? Like Melvin Council can be a great defender and Jayden Dawson can be a 3-point shooter. Tre White is kind of a jack of all trades. Like he can be an elite rebounder. He can be a solid defender. He can shoot the occasional open 3, he can create the occasional closeout opportunity that he drives to the rim and finishes. He can make a pass here or there, right? There's just a lot of things he does well. And he almost becomes that, like, I don't know, to a certain standpoint, like a bit of a glue guy for Kansas in a real way, that he's just going to do a little bit of everything for KU. And for that reason, and because of the positional scarcity, and I especially do love the rebounding. Like, you look at the offensive and defensive rebound rates for like wings, he basically was in like 89th percentile or higher at both. I think that's going to make Kansas a really good rebounding team. When you combine that, when he's playing next to like Flory Badunga, like, they're going to go after some boards and get them. So I'm going to give that one a B+. Now, if we add Mbia to this question, right, as kind of a quasi transfer, I guess he was committed to NC State at one point in time, but got out of his NLI, but as an international player coming in, I think I'd give the Mbia one. I don't know. This one's tough. Because he is so ceiling, and like, if Mbia comes in, he's one of the best backup centers in the country, that would not surprise me, because the dude's got like a 7'9" wingspan. You don't see that a lot at the college level. You could also convince me that he's too raw, and it's like, okay, you might have some struggles there at different points. So I'm going to go with a B for Paul Mbia, I guess. This is one where I think if you would have added Ege Demir, like, I might have had that as an A-. Now, part of that could be that, would you been able to, get him eligible or whatnot? If you would have added Bryce Desire, which we've gone over that, like, Bill Self was right in not doing that, because it doesn't seem like that was going to be a possibility to get him eligible. But if you would have been able to, that would have probably been an A or an A- for me. I'm going to go with a B for Mbia. And I think the long-term potential, if you told me Mbia stays for 2-3 seasons at Kansas, like, I think year 2, year 3, you might be looking at an A, honestly. But for this year specifically, there are some questions about the rawness. How ready is he going to be right away? That's what keeps it away from an A for me. But also, when you have that length at the college level that guys don't see very often, and when you are selling a backup center spot, which is going to be a little bit harder to sell to certain guys who maybe want a ton of playing time, I do think that was a very solid addition for KU and Bill Self. And so overall, if you just add up all of those, right, basically you end up with, okay, I had 3 Bs and a B+, essentially, right? That basically averages out to being basically a B, right? And that makes sense to me, right? Because if we're looking at what this offseason was for KU, I think it was a good offseason. It was one where they filled a lot of needed roles around Darryn Peterson, but you also felt a little short that you didn't add that one other like game changer, that one other player that you feel like can be a for sure all conference player, like your Darian Williams, your Dame Sarr, right? One of these other players, your Donovan Dents, your Keyshawn Hall. It felt like you were one like big game changer short in that regard, and that's probably what would have made it an A. But you still probably got a B this offseason, which is still good. And when you factor in that Darryn Peterson is really the biggest offseason get of them all, I mean, it's basically, it would be an A if you include him, right? And that's the most important thing. But I do think this was a bit of an underrated one, because I do think if you asked probably some national media, how would you grade the KU offseason, I think they'd probably get a lot of C's from people, not really taking into account the role type of stuff as much as we do from kind of the local level. All right, let's finish up here. Latest news. This is Locked On Jayhawks. Thanks for joining us on LOJ. And again, don't forget, you can check out Locked On College Football or Locked On College Basketball for your second listen every day. KU football has a new punter, Efren Jasso. I don't know if that's the proper way to pronounce it. It kind of sounds like a Star Wars character. Efren Jasso, like he's like a bounty hunter that's been, I don't know, searching for somebody for a long period of time. He's probably pretty good at his job. Anyway, pretty good at his job too. He's a punter. He, has a scholarship playing college basketball, but he began his career at Arkansas Pine Bluff, also known as Arkansas PB and Jelly. He had 67 punts last season, averaged 40 per game. So not the biggest number that you're talking about, but he's somebody who comes in. We know Finn Lappin is, I think, going to be a really good punter for KU this year. Jasso comes in as a senior. He's punted 3 seasons. The beauty of that is you could redshirt him this season, right? Keep him in 4 games or less. Ideally, he's in none, because at punter, you don't really need to rotate punters. And you can redshirt, and you basically have a year of training your next punter, so that next offseason, you don't have to worry about the punter. So like that addition from Lance Leipold, just kind of a small one, but, one that could save you having to do something this next offseason and focusing more on the, receiver or, I don't know, offensive line, whatever spots you need. The Kansas TBT team, also known as Jayhawks, JHX, They defeated Off the Hook in their first round matchup. 91-78 was the final score. The rebounding, as you would expect, Kansas is loaded with four, and they're playing big. Like, you got Billy Preston playing the four next to, like, essentially like Kevin Young at the four, or I'm sorry, Billy Preston playing the three with like Jamari Traylor at the four or something, and then like Cliff Alexander at the five. Like, they've got size, and they took advantage of it. 44-24 rebounding advantage for them. The big key is going to be avoiding those turnovers. They were outscored 32-15 in points off turnovers, but they win their first game, and you got to see Cliff Alexander go off 17 points, 11 rebounds, double-double. Billy Preston, probably the best player for this Kansas team. I don't know, 19 points, 6 rebounds, 5 assists for him. And then off the bench, we got to see Jacob Hanna from Washburn score 6 points. That was cool. Marcus Bell had 15 points on 6 of 7. He was a former like JUCO and some other smaller school product. So good, successful first game for them as they won by 13. Now tonight, if you're listening to this on Monday, they're playing the Kansas State alumni team. So a little extra there. Should be a fun one, and we'll see if they can make it to the round of 16 once again. The last thing I wanted to mention later this weekend, upcoming, it's this Sunday, is our trivia event at Johnny's Tavern in West Lawrence. So last chance during this week to get registered. We've got double-digit teams right now. You can have a team up to 6 people. There's a small entry fee, but it's single-digit dollars per person if you have 6 people in there. And all the money goes to the prize pot. I'm not taking a dime of it myself. It's all going to the prize pot for the winners. We have prizes going out for, I think it's like the top 3 teams. We're also giving away like gift cards and apparel during it that you could be the last place team, but if you get like the bonus question, you might win some free apparel and stuff. And it's going to be a good time. You can come hang out. It's all KU basketball trivia. So I highly recommend checking that out. It's jayhawktrivia@gmail.com. You can hit me up on social media, and I'll make sure to direct you in the right ways to get registered for that this Sunday at 6 o'clock over at Johnny's Tavern in West Lawrence. All right, that'll do it for this episode of Locked on Jayhawks. You can find our show anywhere you get your podcast, including on our YouTube page, where you can like and subscribe to the show. See you next time.